Satan's Soldier of Fortune is the second full-length album from Departure Chandelier. This is a uh, Montreal, Quebec, and New York City-based black metal band, and I don't think we have to qualify that too much, other than you can clearly tell that this is aimed at a certain era of French black metal, and that they said as much when they started out the project. They put out a demo back in 2011. They had recorded something like 3 demos and an album at that time in 2010 to 2011, and they've been intermittently releasing new releases under this name since I think 2018 or 2019. I remember I reviewed the first album. I didn't quite get the timeline back then, but it seems like this is their first new material recorded for this project since 2011, 2012 or so. So this is not an archival release. This is a new release from the band, and none of that is all that important, but it is important that you get an idea of what this band sounds like. And I guess that will depend how familiar you are with French black metal early on, and how that translates to your expectations for this band and how they've developed over time. Because this second record is a little bit different than the first one, where I would say that some of their guitar progressions and compositions are a little bit more, quote unquote, primitive, and less of the sort of 2010 headspace for black metal. But they've always been kind of based around what I would consider something like a Vlad Tepes or Osculum Infame, where French black metal was in a different headspace in the late 90s, and the LLN and all that, and there's a lot to consider there. I wouldn't say that they're trying to sound like the most raw and non-commercial stuff back then, but more so the early development of the sound. So if you don't know what that means or what that's all about, you could still equate a lot of what they do with what the current Quebecois scene is considered to be doing. So anyway, we'll check out a clip here, get a sense for the sound of this record and how that might compare to Antichrist Rise to Power. So I figure they scrapped a lot of that old material for a reason. Either it didn't fit what they wanted to be doing at the time, or it wasn't that good. Now, we could argue about which releases from this band are good and what aren't, and I think that'd be valuable, because then that would kind of help me decide whether or not you'd like this new record. Because I think if you like the Black Crest of Death and that demo and the sound of it, there's some of that sound. There's some Antichrist Rise to Power on here in terms of how they use the keyboards to create the mood and the chivalric black metal feeling of it all. But the riffs are different this time around, and I think we can go to a more primitive side of French black metal to talk about that. And we find that there are more menacing grooves here. There's an early 90s sound. I would say there's almost like a 1992, 91 feeling to some of these songs. And all that should mean is that they're a little bit more basic. They're a little bit less melodic in nature, and just kind of a more primal black metal statement. And really, that's basically most of what I had to say about this album. It wasn't really a deep thing to really explore and talk about, because again, they're going for these kind of tuneful, hard-edged, very basic black metal songs, which aren't exactly what I was expecting as a follow-up to Antichrist Rise to Power. I was expecting something much more elaborate and years removed from that sound. But it seems like they kind of just leaned back and tried to recreate that in a maybe they went a little bit too far with the sort of the primitivity of it, and that doesn't mean it's a bad record. I like this idea of people getting a better idea of what old school black metal means and what the early stuff really was all about. And we're seeing a lot more of that these days, rather than the sort of retread of the symphonic rise to power, as it were, otherwise. So I like where they took it with this record. I don't think it's the most memorable record in their discography so far, but it's got such good parity with what else they've done. It's just like a different flavor of it, something just a variation, to the point where it's still valuable for its melodic side, but there's a little bit more of a, like I said, a menace to this that might be more interesting to people who are in tune with that kind of thing. So for me, that's a high recommendation. That's a fairly high score. I think the theme is very strong, and I think there's some solid immersion and feeling put into this music. But I think that the audiovisual design is maybe either trying too hard or not hard enough. It's kind of in between, and the I don't know how long this will last because I really haven't had any of these songs stuck in my head other than some of the choruses from like the heavier songs. So we'll see how that pans out, and you'll see it on my end of the month list. It is one of the better records released this month.
I am all in this world.